During my training for ministry many years ago, I went on a placement with the British Army. This was in the early years when the Army lacked a female Anglican chaplain and was quite keen to encourage recruitment. I had an enjoyable, although nerve-wracking time, encountering situations which were deeply unfamiliar to a museum curator from the Cotswolds. At the end of my stay, the wonderful Army Padre who had been supervising me gave me an A4 piece of paper which he had carefully decorated with a clearly limited supply of clip art and printed out, "This is to certify that Sally Ann Welch walks on water." This gave me a huge boost for the final grueling year of training, but deep down, I recognized that this was a bit of an exaggeration for what I had achieved. Further years of family life and ministry have convinced me of what I already knew, that Sally Ann Welch most definitely cannot walk on water. And neither could Peter. Before we examine Peter's actions, let's make quite sure we've distinguished this calming of the storm from the other, more famous one. In the one we all hear about as children, the storm is ferocious, the disciples fear for their lives, and Jesus tells them not to be afraid and calms the storm. In this case, there is another storm, but the disciples are not frightened by it. What they are terrified by is the sight of a ghost walking across the water to the boat. Jesus reassures them as previously, identifying himself in his repetition of the same language. "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Then Peter challenges Jesus. If it is really you. Peter uses the same language here that Satan uses to tempt him. If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. More sinister still, they are the words used by the crowd at the foot of the cross. Come down from the cross, if you are the Son of God. We know that Peter's words will not earn approval, that they are not in the right spirit, and the outcome cannot be good. And it isn't. Jesus allows Peter to challenge him, and Peter embarks on his journey across the waves, but it isn't long before he begins to sink. "Lord, save me," he cries, and is helped back into the boat by Christ. This passage is often taken to mean that we can all walk on water, all achieve the most amazing, miraculous things if we only trust really hard in Jesus. I wonder whether it isn't exactly the opposite. Dear Peter, poor, misguided Peter, who tries so hard and so consistently misjudges the situation, has made a signal error. In his favor, when he discovered that he was sinking through the waves rather than walking on them, when he realized that through his own actions he was up to his neck in trouble, he did have the knowledge to call on Jesus to save him. We can be reassured ourselves, just as the reading from the Epistle to the Romans reminds us that even when we are mired in a sinful situation of our own making, if we call upon Jesus Christ to deliver us, he will indeed do so. And it's the rescue of Peter that leads the disciples to recognize Jesus for who he is. But nonetheless, Peter has tested Jesus, and worse, has tried to take upon himself the attributes that are not human, but divine. As disciples, we are called to follow Jesus, and yes, to be Christ-like. But very definitely, we are not called to act as if we ourselves were the Son of God. Note that when Peter, soaking wet, does climb back into the boat, the disciples don't all say, "Really sorry about the whole sinking thing, better luck next time." Instead, for the first time in Matthew's Gospel, they recognize Jesus as the Son of God and worship him. The message, I think, is clear. Jesus walks on water, That's his job. The disciples stay in the boat. That's theirs. And it's not an insignificant task, for the boat is then steered across the Sea of Galilee to Gennesaret, where, the passage continues, after the people of that place recognized him, they sent word throughout the region and brought all who were sick to him and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. Jesus' ministry of healing and preaching relies on the disciples in the boat. They travel with him, enabling his journey, learning from him, working with him, and later on going on without him to carry out his work. It is from the disciples that the mission of the church is born. One of the earliest symbols of Christianity is a boat, with its implications of a place of sanctuary and safety when all around is storms and crisis. Hence the naming of this bit of the church as the nave, after the Latin navis, for boat. But a boat is not a static object, and we are always on a journey as we travel in the ship, which is the church, to the places where God intends us to be so that we can minister there. Peter's misguided attempts to walk on water serve as a reminder that we cannot walk on water however much we want to. Sometimes we convince ourselves we can, and that the things we achieve are in our own strength and abilities. Sometimes other people persuade us that we are more than human, that our gifts put us above those around us. In those ways, disaster lies, both for ourselves and those whom we deceive. To coin a phrase, we are not the Messiah. We need to stay in the boat and get on with the God-given tasks that we have been given, of serving our neighbour, of acting justly, loving mercifully, and walking humbly with the one who walked across the Sea of Galilee to get in the boat beside us, to guide us on our journeys, share in our adventures, and keep us safe in his strength, whatever storms we might encounter. Amen.